welcome to our little podcast here. We're calling it Decision Time.
All right.
Um, let's just start off with like who you are, and how you kind of got into the MMA scene in Canada.
Yeah. For anybody that is not familiar with me, my name is John Ramdeen. I have been involved in the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports in Canada for the better part of 20 years. I started my journey as an unpaid intern working for an upstart media company called Fight Network, which debuted around 2005. Like I said, I was an unpaid editor, and my job was to help create programming for fight fans because I don't think you're going to find a bigger fight fan than myself. I grew up, as a professional wrestling fan, a boxing fan, and there was no such thing as mixed martial arts when I was growing up. But of course, as soon as I had my first glimpse of that, that was right in my wheelhouse. So to be able to have the opportunity to, compile, programming for Fight Network and cut it down to, give like-minded fight fans content from around the world. It was just absolutely amazing for me, and I was more than happy to just being an editor and helping to provide content, fight content for fans like myself. However, the channel was growing, and next thing you know, somebody, one of the decision makers at the channel, we were expanding so much. They asked me, they were doing an audition for somebody, and they asked me to do a stand-in. And because I loved the sport so much, like it was my sport. I really would be surprised if anybody knew more than I did when it comes to like the fans' perspective of stats and teams and all of these things, because I just consumed so much of it. So they asked, because I'm such a fight fan, do I want to stand in with this guy that they're auditioning? And because of my responses were so, I guess they were so concise, and what the producers were looking for, they asked me if I wanted to be on air, and I said sure, if you want me to be. And next thing you know, 2 weeks later, I'm on a flight to Japan to cover K1, one of the greatest kickboxing events in the world, and really that was the beginning of my odyssey in combat sports. And I've had a chance to travel all over the world, calling fights in a whole bunch of different countries. I've called Dustin Poirier's fights before he went to the UFC. I called Cyril Gane's fights before he went to the UFC. I've called fights with George St. Pierre. I've called fights with one of my great friends, Robin Black. It's just been one of the great joys of my life. I can go on and on, but those are kind of the Coles notes that got me started, and it's been an absolutely crazy journey.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it. And how do you see MMA like slowly, like you've worked so long in the industry, how do you see it continue to grow like in Canada and even in Ontario especially?
Yeah, well, what's funny about it is, it was illegal in Ontario before 2012, and I remember it very, very clearly because we were helping to try to get it legalized here, and it was very, very challenging because the Athletic Commission, and because of the time at that time, George St. Pierre was the biggest star in the world. So because George was the biggest star, and Canada was becoming a hub of mixed martial arts, so many people jumped on board, and there was a huge boom during that time. If you remember George St. Pierre, and there's Patrick Cote, David Loiseau, both Cote and Loiseau challenged for the UFC middleweight championship. Mark Hominick from Ontario challenged Jose Aldo for the UFC featherweight championship. Sam Stout was a star. Chris Clements was a star. There was it was a really, really great time for Canada in mixed martial arts. The problem was there was no developmental scene, certainly in Ontario, because it was against the law, and it was really, really fragmented. So even though we saw an initial boom, that boom kind of stopped, and then we saw a decline in mixed martial arts. And there was a whole group of us that weren't sure if mixed martial arts if it would ever get back to the days of how exciting it was when George St. Pierre and some of these other, even sooner, like more recent after George St. Pierre, I was Robin Black and I were the voice of TKO, and TKO were their heavyweight champion. They're back in the day, their welterweight champion was George St. Pierre, and Cyril Gahn fought there. Charles Jourdain fought there. Marc Andre Barrios fought there. Like so many great. So during that time, it was great, and then we started seeing a decline, and we just weren't sure if it was ever going to rebound. But thank I don't want to just say it's just on him, but thank God for athletes like Mike Malott and Jasmine that helped reestablish Canada's place in mixed martial arts, and because of that, we're seeing a resurgence. And luckily for me, I get to travel coast to coast covering amateur mixed martial arts, professional mixed martial arts, and to see that how healthy the Ontario landscape is right now and the talent that they're producing, this country has an extremely, extremely bright future.
For sure. Ben, you want to ask a question or?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, would you say that do you think that it was hard getting coverage of Canadian MMA because of the retirement of George St. Pierre in 2017? It's like that 2017 to 2020-ish phase.
Yeah, I think so, because it wasn't just George, if you remember, because it was George and then it was Rory.
Hmm.
So we had two gigantic stars who were potential champions. And when they went away, it's like, well, who's next? Who is
Yeah.
our, and there wasn't really a clear cut, front runner for that spot where, somebody that was exciting, somebody that the fans resonated with, somebody that was good on the mic. And, I say Mike Malott just happened to be that guy. He's one of my broadcast partners, and his story, and that's what fans resonate with. If when you know the story, and when the UFC, that's what they're really, really good at, is they're good at telling the stories of these athletes, because a lot of the times we consider them superhuman because they're in their underwear and they fight inside of a cage, but they deal with emotions and they deal with hurt the way most of us deal with it. So we just elevate these guys, and nobody's was willing to step up to the plate. And the next thing you know, you have a whole slew of them stepping up to the plate. So yeah, it's I think that after George and Rory stepped down, we were just waiting for somebody, and Mike and Jasmine were that next level. And if I could be so bold, I'm now in the management game, and I believe that I have the future of mixed martial arts, certainly in Canada, in Hunter Lee. He is an absolute beast. He is the best prospect in Canada, if not the world. Everybody loves this kid. Everybody's absolutely terrified of him. He is absolutely built for mixed martial arts. This was what he's destined to do. And we got an announcement today that he's going to be competing. We got the contract signed on July 19th against Chris Chu, CFFC Cage Fury Fighting Championships, live on UFC Fight Pass, taking on a 4-2 guy. And yeah, he's ready for this challenge, and yeah, he's going to prove that he is not only worthy of the UFC, that he's on his way to challenge for UFC gold.
Do you agree with the name change from the Manther to the new one? I can't quite
Big
remember what you said it
game,
was going to
big
be. The
game.
big
Yeah,
game.
I'm a huge fan of the Manther. I think it's great. I think then like nobody's ever had that nickname before. So Hunter the Manther Lee, for me, makes sense. But we've done the poll, and I think you have to listen to the fans. And
Yeah.
luckily, it makes sense as well. He has the leopard skin shorts, so for him to come out to Big Game Hunter Lee really makes sense. And I think the fans will, rally behind that, and I think that will help his brand as his career progresses for sure.
Is there any other prospects that you could kind of see like in Canada making a push like Hunter Lee is, like possibly even getting like a Dana White Contender Series or even a UFC contract?
Oh yeah, there's actually tons right now. I mean, the best. You want to talk about some of the best prospects in the country? I think the best prospect in the country over the past certainly 5 years has been Tony Laramie from Windsor, Ontario, representing the Maximum Training Center, which is led by Reno Balcastro. So he's the head coach of Kyle Prepelic, who just had an unsuccessful return to the UFC. Unfortunate taking on Benoit Saint Denis on short notice. I do not envy him at all. But he will be back stronger. This kid is one of the most talented fighters I've ever seen. I've had the chance to call a number of his fights. He's extremely skilled. As I said, Tony Laramie he is, mark my words, he will eventually challenge for the UFC 125-pound championship. He is just an absolute savage stud. He currently competes for Ryzen, and then his older brother, TJ Laramie, who fought in the UFC. So that the Maximum Training Center guys, they are all very, very good. So those are three prospects right there. Mandel Nallo, who is originally from TriStar. Now, I mean, he's a Toronto guy, but his main gym is TriStar. He's going. I think this is South. He's going to Tender Series. So there's a lot of prospects right now. The guys at Shave Bears in Alberta, those are some serious cats. Adam Posner out in BC. This kid 100% is going to the UFC. This kid, he is so slick. When you talk about martial artists, Adam Posner is the epitome of martial arts. He is a guy that just improves and wants to be so slick and smooth everywhere he goes. And I think he is going to be one of these guys. One of my old training partners from here in Barrie, actually, from Empire MMA, Chris Bryan, a savage as well, 4-1 in his mixed martial arts career. His last 4 fights all by win by finish. So he has a bright future as well. So there's a lot of fighters from coast to coast that Abdelaziz, undefeated from Gavin Tucker's gym in Eastern Canada. Like they're Mirza Hopovac from Fight Factory, Jeff Harrison's gym. That dude is friggin' terrifying as a heavyweight. It really is an awesome time right now to be a mixed martial arts fan in Canada and specifically Ontario. Like, if you want to follow the scene is super healthy.
I think it seems like recently there's just been a kind of sports renaissance in Canada. Like any sport, all of Canada is on the rise. Do you think that, MMA, we're on the rise, and do you think we're gonna keep staying up, or like do you think we're just gonna keep getting better and better with more prospects and more top talents?
I mean, the thing is, the reason why it's gotten so good is because there's no secrets anymore, and you're getting good gyms popping up all over the place. Before you really had to go to Montreal. You had to go to Montreal. You had to go to BC to get really high level training, and I'm sure there's pockets in between there, Calgary and whatnot. But now it doesn't matter where you go. You can find Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts in every kind of, I don't want to say major urban center, but we're here in Barrie. You can find a whole bunch of Jiu-Jitsu black belts here in Barrie. You know what I mean? So when you use that as the benchmark, there is no excuse. And if the biggest issue is pay, because a lot of these young athletes on the small stage, there's no money. There's no money in it, and there's no real developmental league, because it's not like a friend of mine put it really eloquently, because the bar for mixed martial arts is extremely low. Like, you don't need to have any type of extensive amateur career. You don't have to have any amateur career. You can just say, hey, I'm a professional fighter. Whereas, if imagine that in the end, you want to be a professional hockey player or a professional basketball player or professional football player. There are a shitload of stages that you have to go through to be able to be a professional in those realms. Well, mixed martial arts, it hasn't, there is not a system in place. So until we get the OHL, where there is a developmental league, and the UFC is doing it, that's why they're opening PI, the PI institutes. They had the one in Vegas. They've just opened one, I think, in Latin America, I think in Mexico City, and one in Hong Kong or something like that, where they're
Yep.
there to develop talent. Like, that's the whole purpose, right? And if you don't have a real an infrastructure for a developmental league or program, you're just not going to have the athletes, and that is a big factor.
For sure. And we're getting more events, like more UFC events in Canada. We had the Toronto event last year and the Montreal event recently, and now the Vancouver Fight Night just got announced. If you had a message specifically to, the leaders of UFC, Dana White and Hunter and all that, if you had a message to them to get them to come more and more back to Canada, what would you kind of say to them?
You know what? I don't have to say anything to them because if you know the UFC's history, the UFC loves Canada because Canada saved the UFC during the dark days when they were banned from television, banned for pay per view in the UFC. They were able to make money in Canada. They were able to sell pay per views in Canada. So because of that, they almost feel indebted to Canada, and not that they do feel not that they're indebted to Canada, but they
Yeah.
know that the market has always been very, very strong here. And for a country, the US has 350 million, we have 35 million. And to be able to have enough events where you can go to Vancouver, you can go to Edmonton, you can go to Toronto, you can go to Montreal, you can go to Ottawa, and you're selling out, 15,000 seat venues on a regular basis. The goal for them is like, wait a second, George St. Pierre did 55,000. If he can do that once, we just need to create the stars, and that's all it comes down to is creating the stars. You saw the reaction in Vancouver when all the Canadians won. It was absolutely amazing, and the UFC wants to replicate that. Unfortunately, it didn't translate in Toronto when Strickland fought, but you know, um, they understand that it's a healthy market here, and that's why they're constantly looking for new talent, and that's why, again, shameless plug, Hunter's perfect for it. Hunter Lee is perfect for it because they need stars, and he's a star. If you know his background, he has competed at the world stage in wrestling a number of times. This stuff is child's play to him. But competing against guys that are 4-2 when he's had hundreds of high level wrestling matches at the world stage. He was an Olympic alternate for the Paris Games. So this kid is so primed for the prime time that right now he's so ready to surpass all these guys. And and I'm behind the scenes. I know guys that have fought in the UFC. I know guys that are on the Ultimate Fighter that will not sign to fight him because he will smash their brains in. And when you have somebody that wants to talk shit on the mic and somebody that does not need the motivation to go and train, a lot of these other guys do not train the way that Hunter does. He does not need the motivation to want to be the best in the world because that is just his mindset. So once the UFC fully gets behind him, they're going to have another star, and he's really just going to be the catalyst for so many because since I've had the success with Hunter, the amount of people of really high quality prospects that have reached out, it's super exciting, like really exciting.
For sure. Well, I personally don't have any more questions for you. I don't know if Ben does.
I was actually going to ask, do you think that, like, how do you think it would be the best way forwards, like you were saying, to have an OHL for, would you say? How do you think is the best way moving forward for like a unified MMA or like an official fight federation? How do you think is the best way for them to move forwards to try and, get more funding and get more promotion?
Yeah, that's a challenge because it's right now it's the wild west in Ontario. The language has changed, the regulations have changed. Just coming into July and August, there are a slew of shows planned, amateur shows planned, professional shows planned in Ontario, from Barrie to Cornwall, from to Stony, all over the province. Now the issue is we need to have the talent. Like, is there the talent? Like, if you have 10 shows, well, let's just say 5 shows. Excuse me, 5 shows between July 30th, July 15th, and August 15th. Well, 5 shows, let's just say there's 10 fights per card, right? So 10 fights per show, that's 20 fights. If you're having 10 fights a show, well, that means 20 fighters per card. Over 5 shows, you need 100 fighters. Well, where are these fighters coming from? So that's the issue, is that we need to have like we're just at kind of square one because things are changing right now, and the athletes have to understand that they are the commodity, and eventually uh, the opportunities are going to be there. They just have to. The thing is about mixed martial arts is it's not everything is there's not a level playing field, in the sense that some athletes just want to compete in amateur, some want to go pro and just want to compete for unified, some want to go to the PFL, some want to be UFC champions. So it all depends on the goals of each fighter, because there's, in addition to being skilled in your chosen discipline, you have to have a lot of bounces go your way. You need the promoters to like you. You need to be marketable. You need to have a certain look. There's all these things that kind of have to fall into place. A lot of people think that this is, it's fighting is the same as any other sport, and it's really not. It's, in addition to going out there and trying to smash the shit out of your opponent, you have to have a good social media following. You have to have, marketability, because it's entertainment. And especially if the goal is to get to the UFC, well, their parent company TKO, they also own the WWE, so they know what drives engagement. They understand how to fill arenas, and they need stories, and they need interesting personalities, and people that are going to, sell the sport and sell the spectacle of mixed martial arts. That's why they love guys like Connor. That's why they love guys like Khabib and Colby Covington, and like there's no shortage of athletes that the UFC loves. You can just look at some of these athletes that may not have had the success, but they know how to drive the needle or move the needle, and that's really all that matters. You look at Marc-Andre Barrios, for example. The guy just was knocked out in 3 straight fights, and he was on the. I'm sure he was on the chopping block. And next thing you know, he has a spectacular knockout. Risa has a re-signed a massive contract, and you could have a career like that. You don't have to talk smack, but that's a hard career. That means either you're getting knocked out or your opponent's getting knocked out, and you can lose two and win one, and lose one and win two, and lose one and win one. But you have to be super electrifying every single time inside of the cage, and that's hard on the body sometimes. Not sometimes. It is hard on the body. In the brain.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and your time out of sitting at the beach to sit here and talk some fighting with us. We very much appreciate it. And anytime you want to hop back on, we're always welcome to talk MMA and combat sports. Even Hunter's next fight, we could definitely talk about that more.
Sounds like a plan, gents. It's been an honor.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
We'll do it again.